My time starts now. Win again, the judge will vote for the team that best benefits the livelihoods of British people. Contention 1 is UK steel industry. Currently, the UK faces much lower US tariff on steel than EU. According to Courier from this year, US agreed to cut tariff rate on British steel exports to zero. Meanwhile, tariff on steel from the EU stay high at 50%, according to White House from 2 weeks ago. Maintaining current UK-US trade ties in steel is crucial, as Hinder states that the UK exported steel worth of $492 million to the US in 2024. Furthermore, our card specifically indicated the preferential treatment from US is seen as a lifeline to UK steel industry, as it's on its verge of collapsing. Thus, rejoining and adopting higher tariff will lead to the ultimate collapse of UK steel industry, as UK will be forced to adopt a significantly higher tariff. Impact is twofold. First is unemployment. According to UK Steel, the UK steel and aluminum industry employs over 139,000 people. Rejoining put their job at risk. McKinsey fortified the job losses associated with a 73% increase in probability of death due to stress and depression and subsequent substance abuse or other harmful behaviors. Second is renewable energy. The UK 25 site that still have an enormous role in supporting UK clean energy. It is fundamental in the construction of wind turbines and manufacturing electric vehicles. This is crucial in achieving net zero UK, as steel is essential to meet the UK's decarbonization objective. The improvement in environment through net zero benefit public health. Gregory 23 stated that net zero will result in substantial reduction in mortality, leading to at least 2 million additional years lived across the population. Thus, according to its medical innovation, rejoining the EU will subject the UK to a less efficient and more protectionist pharmaceutical regulatory regime. Quarters finds in 2023 the EU's pharmaceutical industry is in danger of collapsing, as the innovation incentive is hampered by stringent regulations and a failing patent system. The average patent filing cost in UK also almost 10 times the cost in UK compared to Green 25. Therefore, EU pharmaceutical innovation is on its downfall, as every fund in 2023 Europe's share of global pharma R&D investment is predicted to reduce by a third in 2040. A loss of this amount of innovation will translate to 16 million years of life loss across the EU. Impacts medical innovation saving lives. In the status quo, UK pharmaceutical companies are actively developing drugs that have the potential to save lives. An empirical study finds in 2024 that the UK is ranked 4th in the world in biopharma R&D. Its leading pharma companies like GSK and AstraZeneca have achieved breakthroughs in therapies of cancer and respiratory diseases in recent years, which in total contribute to approximately 200,000 deaths in UK per year. By rejoining Prozac halts a positive UK biopharma innovation trend and damages British patients. Contrary to its domestic backlash, during the election last year, Starmer promised to not rejoin. Stacey 24 stated that Keir Starmer have insisted that UK will not rejoin the EU within his lifetime. There is a key assurance to support of the Labour Party. A study by YouGov in 24 shows that the public says that Labour do not have a mandate to rejoin, while 70% of 2024 UK Labour voters do not support a rejoin. Workers already confirmed there is less than 10% of people in the UK who actually thinks rejoin matters in the first place, which means the general public would not be happy with the UK government pouring time and resources into the lengthy rejoin negotiation. Affirming means an instant collapse of the current government, as Evans 24 said that Starmer is burning through his political capital. If the Labour government rejoins now, it will be breaking one of the major promises made to his voters and letting down of his own members of parliament, leading to a possible re-election of the government. Hanson 24 stated that members of parliament could hold a vote of no confidence to call for a re-election. A poll by Political shows that the Reform Party or the Brexit Party is highly in favor of winning the next election, and they would instantly withdraw from the EU again, as the leader Richard Test states in 2024 his party could simply undo any deals with the EU. If they win the next election, they will simply reverse any impact coming from rejoining. Any impact from the case gets zero and extra social house will be created. Spring 2021 stated that the referendum to leave the EU was followed by an increase in hate crime of 25%. The rejoin debate will deepen UK's social division and increasing social unrest due to the Brexit debate. Pro reignites general public's division, proud to negate.
Time starts in 3, 2, 1, now. First, 2 pieces of observation. First, Kant cannot simply criticize EU bad, rather than have to prove UK is uniquely damaged by rejoining without other factors influencing. Second, Kant cannot vaguely argue EU has more regulations. It must clearly state which regulations are uniquely linked that to harm the UK. Contention is economy. Supplement A single market. Following Brexit, the UK has departed from the EU single market. With the single market's internal market without borders, as the EU claims that they ensure free trade by removing various barriers such as legal and technical ones. This departure has devastated UK's trade with EU. UIDO 2024 finds that post-Brexit data show a 27% drop in UK exports and 32% reduction in imports to and from the EU. This is mainly due to the emergence of non-tariff barriers post-Brexit. According to True 2025, despite the fact that the UK negotiated a free trade deal with the EU, the negative impact coming from the time-consuming and complicated paperwork the businesses have to fill out when importing and exporting to EU. This is significant harm as the EU is the UK's largest trading partner. Built in 2025 found that before Brexit, 44% of UK export went to, while 53% of UK imports come from the EU. Moreover, according to Low 2025, Brexit perpetuates the investment by increasing investment risk. As a result, UK business investment could have been 12.4% higher in 2023 if Brexit did not happen. FDI inflows dropped by 37% as the multinational companies relocated to the EU to preserve access to the single market. Overall, Brexit has caused the UK economy to shrink. According to Tony Blair Institute for Global Change 2023, UK economy is 5.5% poorer now than it would have been if it stayed in the EU. It impacts people's livelihood. According to an LSE study in 2022, Brexit added almost £6 billion to UK food bills, affecting poorest households the most. This is because the cost of food imported from the EU skyrocketed because of extra barriers. As a result, Marsden 2024 claims that UK's food poverty level is now among the highest in Europe. 15% of UK households experience food insecurity, equivalent to 8 million adults and 3 million children going hungry. Additionally, because of Brexit, Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan 2024 claims that the average UK citizen is nearly £2,000 worse off, and HAM 2024 finds the UK is projected to have nearly 3 million fewer jobs by 2035. Rejoining is the best solvency agreed by most experts. According to Wilton from a month ago, rejoining the EU could boost growth by 4 to 5% in the long term, which helps UK to reverse economic decline. Continue to life. Supplement 8 defense. First is damaging leadership of European defense. According to Hatfield 2021, while in the EU, the UK exercised significant leadership in EU's foreign security and defense policies, or FSDP. After Brexit, the UK is isolated from this collective European defense. Warsaw Institute finds that in 2020, that Brexit would prevent the UK from joining peacekeeping operations run by the EU. The inclusion would mean that British Foreign Ministry will lose strategic importance. Also, UK will no longer have a say over European armed forces, and the British Army will fall behind. Hastings 2024 stated that rejoining is the only way in which the UK can regain its leadership, as EU nations are inclined not to respect the UK, who turns back on European partnerships through Brexit, and that rejoining is crucial due to rising tensions, as the Secretary General of NATO has warned its European members that it is time to move a warm and facing the threat from Russia. Impact: EU unity and power projection prevents Russia, Middle East, and Europe war. Filter 18 said that the EU is essential for peace stability in the world. This can be seen in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. The end of the European Union could return Europe to triple hatreds, in which destructive forces could undo 70 years of statesmanship. Subwing B vaccines. Currently, the majority of vaccine doses within the EU come from the UK. AstraZeneca could disclose that it supplied over 70 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine to the European Union by mid-June 2021, with expectations to surpass 80 million by the end of June. At the same time, EU officials stated that only 1 million of those doses originated from factories within the EU. Hence, over 98 to 99% of vaccine doses come from the UK. Impact is saving lives. Analysis from the PMC estimated that at least 232,000 COVID-19 deaths among unvaccinated adults could have been prevented over a 15-month period if vaccination coverage had been higher. Thus, proud to affirm.
Proceeding. My time of start my first word for first constructive speakers qualifier. How would you guarantee rejoining would not trigger public backlash against the current party?
So basically talking about that, how can I make sure that there are no public
backlash? Yeah.
So what are you talking about on this public backlash?
So basically, we tell you two things. One, 70% of the labor voters, they don't want to get back to EU. And second, 10%, less than 10% people in the United Kingdom genuinely care about this matter as EU. And that means that if they see the government powering times and resources into joining something they simply don't care about, it's more likely going to trigger a public backlash against the current party. We say it is bad because it leads to re-election and social unrest. Yeah, we're constructive.
Yeah, sure. I think it doesn't matter, right? So if this debate is simply because about public, if they want, then we do it. And if the public don't want, then we don't do it. This debate can't go on, right? And second of all, even if you just don't abide this, we tell you that actually now the public is liking this, which I think is like a 52 to like 48%.
No, I think the thing is not on the referendum. The thing is for the Labour Party is currently in power, right? If they're voters, they don't genuinely care about joining the EU or not. That means that if they see Starmer pouring into like money, billions of pounds into rejoining, they're simply not gonna have faith in this leader anymore.
Sure, like will respond to that.
I think this matters more because like UK is democratic. Therefore, you have to prioritize some sort of public opinion before anything else. But like, yeah, since you said Kevin will respond to it, you can proceed.
Yeah, sure. So on your argument of steel and aluminum, how can we ensure that Donald Trump actually implements a 0% tariff when the amount of trade talks between the UK is marginal and Trump has had a history of not following his promises?
Okay, first of all, I don't see what exact history you're referring to. Second, there is 492 millions of steel trade contributing from UK to US. I don't see how it is marginal. And third, I think at the end of the day, you guys are more uncertainty, right? What can be certain is that Trump hates the EU. This can be exemplified from a 15% tariff on EU compared to 10% UK, 50% of steel industry tariff on EU. That means as long as UK acceded to the European Union, it's immediately going to trigger Trump and raise the tariff because you don't know what he will do to UK. There's just one thing for sure: he hates European Union. He definitely does not want UK to side with the EU, and this triggers retaliation. Moving into my question, in our constructive speech, I've already talked about how the tariff system or the preferential tariff is the one that tied UK steel industry alive. How are you able to tie this industry alive in your side when we're telling you this preferential treatment doesn't exist anymore?
Wait, what industry?
The steel industry, basically what we're talking about.
So how can we can tie this and make it alive, right?
Yeah, because US trade to UK is a lifeline. All right, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna take a little bit of prep. My time will start. Now, an overview, our political backlash argument is going to undermine all their impacts in the case. Starmer promised not to rejoin the EU, calling the lifetime guarantees across Stacey 2024. Polling shows 70% of Labour voters oppose rejoining, meaning it firmly breaks the core campaign premise and alienates Labour MPs. Even if they read evidence saying survey finds more UK people want to rejoin EU, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean they will actually support it for two reasons. One, Walker 23 said less than 10% of people think rejoin even matters to the UK. It's not even a priority on UK national matter, according to the people. But secondly, if they want to rejoin the EU, they could have voted for parties who actually supported rejoin in the election last year, such as Liberal Democrats, but they voted for Labour who did not want to rejoin. It's easy to tell people who survey you, I think UK should rejoin, or click a random voting link online, but it's different from real execution. That risks a no confidence vote and snap election. Polls show that Reform Party is likely gonna come in and win the election, and as their leaders literally said last year, they will be undoing any benefits. Their case doesn't matter because Brexit will happen again. Moving on their case. One on the economy impact, two responses. One, dealing. Research shows that economic decline was caused by Brexit uncertainties instead of UK's absence in the EU. COLA 23 confirms that once a stable post-Brexit framework was established, UK was able to shake the negative impact and got a boost. Rejoin does not reverse this impact. Note that none of their cards actually talk about the impact of rejoining, but it's talking about Brexit. If you go to the website of the 5% card, just in the chat, click the hyperlink attached to the 5% line, it redirects to another article, analysis from OPR, talking about Brexit caused 5% of UK GDP, not rejoining where you increase the GDP. But second, we turn. Rejoining EU brings new uncertainties to trade deals UK signing with other countries, thus another round of damage to the economy. Walker 23 confirms that even if the benefits of rejoining is true, it's only going to get materialized after a long period of negotiation, which means that their benefits are insanely uncertain. But on trade, specifically, we tell you it's not unique. After Brexit, the UK signed TCA with the EU, preserving tariff-free trade. Gulf the UK finds that the TCA eliminates tariff and quotas, but furthermore, they talk about non-tariff regulation barriers. This is also eliminated by a reset deal signed in May this year. Johnstone 25 finds that the agreement is designed to reduce red tape, lower regulatory barriers, and eliminate checks that have slowed trade in recent years. So there's no need to rejoin the EU. Specifically, they talk about food, but red tape on food has also been removed from the new reset deal in May. All sides 25 finds that Britain and EU on Monday agreed to prevent unnecessary border checks on food and sign the food standards deal, which is set to make food cheaper and generate £9 billion to UK economy, according to Guardian. We do not need to rejoin. Under second contention, one on national defense, three responses. One, turn. Brexit has fueled UK tech and defense innovation. Queen 25 finds that free from EU data rules and innovation constraints, UK firms like Graphcore and Darktrace have surged. The UK now ranks as the third largest global fintech hub. Post-Brexit defense spending has surged to 2.3% of GDP, with companies like BAE and Rolls-Royce securing deals with in advanced population and cyber warfare. Rejoining will only hurt the current progress. But second, the EU itself does not even have an established defense framework. KCL paper 2021 finds that in terms of UK defense policy, the EU's limited progress on defense means that Brexit made no difference after all. But thirdly, we have current solvency, new deals. UK and Europe on May 19th, the European Union and United Kingdom concluded a security and defense partnership, which gives UK access to defense fund of €150 billion EU defense funding. Also, UK and France signed a deal to share a nuclear arsenal to provide EU with deterrence capabilities, which means that Europe also has its independent deterrence capabilities against Russia right now. On the argument of vaccines, when we turn, the fundamental reason why UK produce most vaccine is because UK has better patent regime and fosters innovation better. EU regulations delay the market to enter the vaccines, and that's why you shouldn't rejoin, because without medical innovation, there won't be vaccines in the first place. We outran prerequisite because we need medical innovation in the first place before we can give it to people. But secondly, UK's pandemic prevention was a huge success compared to EU during COVID. According to Break 21, the United Kingdom has the highest vaccination rate among the countries of similar size. On the other hand, EU failed. So vote calm.
If everyone is ready, speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Now, first in rebuttal, they tell you they can take down non-tariff barriers. Two responses. First of all, you literally cannot. Look at what these non-tariff barriers are. These are systematic regulatory differences between the UK market versus the EU market. These are things like, let's say, in the steel industry that they talk about, the regulations needed towards steel production in the UK structurally different than those in the EU. What this means that in the end of the day, if they do want to take down these non-tariff barriers, they cannot do so without creating the exact same uncertainty that they talk about in the process of changing all this regulation. But second of all, we tell you, even if they can, impacts are still limited. Look to our cards, which gives you comparative studies versus rejoining the EU or versus staying in the single market versus staying out of the single market. They show how under the status quo, even when non-tariff barriers are actually taken down, even with reset deals, you still see an overall decline in trade. They cannot deny this de facto loss in trade versus their own mechanism that they don't even explain well how they're going to take down non-tariff barriers. But furthermore, they talk about uncertainty in rebuttal. Two responses. First of all, we turn this uncertainty because non-EU membership creates greater intransparency within legislation, which creates further instability. As said, 25 finds that recent deal to the UK adopts EU regulatory changes makes the UK a rule taker, not a rule maker. This limbo lacks democratic legitimacy and transparency, which undermines trust and fuels domestic friction as policies shift unpredictability. The impact of this is simple. Full membership allows transparent negotiation mechanisms, which create greater transparency and greater stability. But second of all, we tell you EU strengthens economic stability through single market alignment. As Peacock 24 finds, that EU membership comes with single market access, which reduces trade friction. But moving on to their case then. First on steel industry, three responses. First of all, we tell you it's probably not going to happen, specifically to the extent they talk about. Just look at how Donald Trump has actually revoked all of his actions. Look to the status quo, where there is a 25% tariff, because that's the only confirmed thing that we can have on Donald Trump's tariff levels against UK steel, which minimizes their impact. But second of all, we mitigate, because UK steel industry is insignificant. It only consists of 1,100 businesses, supporting only around 37,000 jobs, just 0.1% of all of UK employment. Do not buy their 137 car, because it probably comes from outdated sources, where in the past UK production were higher. But moreover, it only produced a record low of 5.6 million ton in 2023, which marks a decline even from historic pandemic lows. It's already on its way down, which means that even in the worst case scenario, if tariff hits it hard, it barely makes that much of a difference. But third of all, we turn, because we think access to the EU market is better. In 2023, the EU produced approximately 126 million tons of crude steel, accounting for 7% of the global output. This means that if they chose to turn to rely on, let's say, EU productions of steel, it would not only be cheaper, but also more accessible, which directly takes down the climate link, because comparatively in our side, when we access the unified market, you get better steel and cheaper steel for greater wind turbine or whatever climate mechanism that they're going to give you. But moreover, on their medical argument, six responses actually. First of all, 5 responses. First of all, we turn, because the patent difference link hinders UK drug production, but it also limits their potential difference to the EU, as currently evidence already find that UK parallel export restrictions, specifically on intellectual property, specifically with the UK plus exhaustion model, means that good place on the UK market cannot be considered exhausted in the EEA. As a consequence, exporting patent or IP protected medicine from the UK to the EU requires permission from rights holder, which creates legal barrier towards trade. But second of all, we mitigate, because we tell you the EU is already actively cutting burden, especially for startups. As T25 finds, the European Commission has launched initiatives to gain feedback from small, medium-sized enterprises, which simplifies the way they work, but simplify also research and innovation. But third of all, we turn again, because we tell you that EU regulations foster greater innovation, as Charter Rule 23 finds that these well-designed risk-based regulations support innovation within the EU. Fourthly, we turn again, because accessing the EU medical infrastructure offers far better healthcare and overall life saving. Look to the death rates during COVID. And fifthly, we deny, because states still get patent autonomy. The EU principle of subsidiary ensures that national legislation is still domestically prioritized, which means that even if the EU has on average higher patent prices, UK firms can still withdraw from it, and UK legislation can still prevent that from happening. But last on domestic backlash, we just have two very simple responses. First of all, we think policy agendas change all the time. Even if the reform wins, it doesn't mean that they will pull out. But second of all, we tell the rise of reform as a far-right party is due to economic reasons. Only solution lies on the pro side. We vote for pro.
Now, the cross.
So time starts my first word. We talk about the principle of subsidiarity, which I know what it is. Who determines whether domestic policy is more effective or less effective than EU's?
Look, your own idea and your own evidence already states how usually domestic policies are more effective, right? And at the end of the day, we think the majority of these judgments go down towards the nations themselves. Not to say, even without subsidiary, there are no patent laws within the EU that specify specifically that you must increase patent law prices towards this extent. Can I take a question?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's just talk about your patent price mechanism then. I believe your specific number was 44,000, right?
4,000 to 400 to 40,000. That's a 10 times.
4,000 to 40,000. To a large drug manufacturer or to a large medical manufacturer, why will that extra 36,000 actually make a difference considering that they're already operating with operational costs that are substantially or exponentially higher than that?
One, they do not only file patent for one single drug. This applies to every single drug they have patent on. So the real cost is many times multiplied that for 40,000. But secondly, that's only one of our links. Our article talks about EU has other regulations on pharma companies, which is on a broad term driving down EU biopharma innovation. It's doing more harm than good. Our evidence specifically indicates that because of the bad regulations, it is driving down EU biopharma R&D investment by a third by 2040, which has cost 16 million years of life loss across EU.
Sure. All right. You can
Okay. Go back to the question. Let's go back to the problem of subsidiarity. You said that when domestic policies are determined as more effective than EU policies, the countries gets to retain their domestic policies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the determination process is still done by EU. It's insanely subjective, and our evidence says that EU-wide regulations are still causing harm. How is that addressed?
First of all, give me an evidence that directly states how in the UK this will also be adopted. But second of all, we think intuitively, if there are already evidences to say these patenting laws within the EU are so harmful, why then will there be public support, or why then will there be even support within the EU to say that we are going to enforce these legislations and enforce these regulations onto the UK?
Because the European Parliament has more say than domestic governments, but you can have a question.
All right, sure. Let's talk about your argument in terms of domestic backlash. In the end of the day, politics is extremely unpredictable. You have no idea how policies are going to shift, but also how people are going to win. Specifically, how will the Reform Party getting elected into office withdraw from the UK and also withdraw from the EU and gain public support from it?
One, the key part of the evidence of the argument is that only less than 10% of the people in UK consider rejoin as any form of matter, as it matters at all. Which means that they will not support the Labour government to spend a large chunk of resources and time to negotiate with the EU on rejoin. Well, realistically, they have more important things to do. That's going to cause a political backlash. And yeah, that's time.
That's cross. Okay.
Proceeding to next summary. My time starts now. I think our opponents kind of win this debate by just dumping random harmful Brexit without explaining how rejoining brings back their disease losses. Judges to look at their constructive. None of the evidence from the constructive actually explain why is rejoining necessarily enough or unique in bringing the harms or the economic cause it lost back. There wasn't card, which is the sole card that explains about why rejoining is necessary. It talks about Brexit instead of rejoining. It doesn't justify the uniqueness of rejoining in the status quo. Two framings on top of everything. One, our coded 23 cards tell you it is uncertainty who triggers the economic decline. It is not like you don't have uncertainty when you rejoin, and therefore, according to Walk 23, even if their evidence might say EU membership might bring benefit, uncertainty after rejoining the EU might come first. Therefore, the pro-side cannot win this debate by killing the economy and then claiming they are doing good by delaying the so-called benefit. Second, judges prioritize our domestic backlash argument over everything. This is crucial because of two reasons. One, 70% of the Labour Party voters do not like the EU. And second, only 10% of the people in the United Kingdom genuinely care about this matter, meaning that they don't care about if they rejoin or they all put out or not. They don't want to see a political leader who is already going through his political downturn, wasting money and resources, which is going to trigger more political backlash. This political backlash is going to trigger a vote of no confidence because of two reasons. One, Charles is already experiencing a political downturn. Second, 70% of the Labour voters are already opposed to rejoining the EU. It's better to sacrifice the party leader who is already declining than risk losing the trust of the general public to the whole public. This is crucial because our opponents tell you we cannot guarantee Reform Party moving into office, but other parties such as the Conservative parties are also pro-Brexit. Whoever moving into office, as long as they're not the Labour Party, will seem to just re-Brexit and zero off the benefit happening on the pro side. There's already an increase of 25% of hate crime if you don't buy anything else due to Brexit. Re-Brexit triggers more polarization. Moving to the main clash to the economy, their office in construction does not make sense at all. First of all, I think it's already clear that none of the cards really explain why rejoining is necessary. Second, even we see to all the benefit impacted by the affirmative side, I think the whole offense doesn't make sense. Two reasons. One, the push on whole non-tariff barriers didn't make sense. What the Kevin explained to you is pure hypothesis. It's already taken down. According to our Offset 25 card, EU and you guys already negotiated taking down that eliminated a vast majority of checks and paperwork for UK agricultural food export, which is the major source of trade disruption. Then the reason why we say on net we want because we bring $9 billion pounds benefit towards the United Kingdom. Even if they can go on and tell you regulations are different, at the end of the day, we see all of the EU regulations are harmonized, do not make any difference happening in their side. And second, even if you don't buy anything happening in the economic sector, we tell you on steel, we still want. Because one, our COVID 25 card specifically said US is a lifeline to UK steel industry. Without US trade, UK industry collapse. If joining the EU means that you're going to trigger Trump's hostility, raising the steel tariff from 0% to 50%. This triggers a loss of jobs for 140,000 people and a 2 million potential increase of lifespan. This is not refuted by our opponent's side because it's simply neglected and considered a logic thing based on this proud tool of negate.
So often roadmap, basically first on clash analysis, second, if I have time, moving on to weight. Time starts in 3, 2, 1, go. First of all, clash analysis. First clash is about trade. Hey, judge, no opponents try to tell you how red tape trade barriers are taken down, but read the nature of these barriers. There's systematic regulatory differences between the UK and the EU, which means that unless they completely reform the entire UK market in every single sector, they cannot take down these barriers. Not to say doing that directly leads to instability and uncertainty that they give you in rebuttal. First, we think the TC and other AFTAs are not sufficient. They either cover trade partners that are insignificant to the EU, or they simply cannot benefit the UK economy overall. Evidence indicates that one, they do not engage non-tariff barriers, but second, includes service industries, which is the most important sector in the UK economy, composing 80% of this economy. See, they give you this then give us access to all our impact in condition one. We prove that when we join the single market, you get the £2,000 per family boost, you get the 3 million employment boost, and a 4.25% GDP boost caused by the integration into single market, but also the potential adoption of euro, which they talk about. Second, patent and drugs. Hey, judge clash procurely when as Kong gets the entire cost and effect relationship wrong. The case is to say that EU limitations on patent and innovation means that drugs developed in the UK would be smaller. However, first, we already give you evidence to indicate how specific patenting laws, including patent price, can be regulated dependently by individual nations. But two, that getting access to the EU market is going to lead to benefits. Note the entire reason why hundreds of thousands died during COVID in the EU was exactly because of lack of accessibility from UK vaccines. Third of all, steel industry. This is just an even clearer pro-win. Accessing the EU would mean we can access a greater and better supply of steel products, but also exports to a better market. Even if buying the best case scenario, the tiny size of the UK steel industry would mean that impacts are eventually outweighed. First of all, domestic backlash. This argument just filled with uncertainty and a lack of feasibility. A main reason why Brexit happened in the first place was because how people assume Brexit would have lead to a growth in the economy and nation power for the UK. But now with clear analysis and studies showing the opposite, people's support for Brexit again after joining is likely to be much lower. But furthermore, we think that if the Reform Party wins this election, it is uncertain what their specific political agendas are. Now, a few pieces of weight. First of all, we are magnitude of impact. Opponents' biggest impact on the 137,000 jobs in steel, aluminum, and deaths reduced from respiratory diseases. However, we clearly indicated a 3 million regain of jobs will opt into the single market again. But we also a 232,000 reduction of deaths possible if vaccines were better distributed. We are solvency. In the end of the day, almost all benefits our opponents can require solvency from the pro side to be actually achieved. For instance, their steel industry impact can only be achieved if there is a large enough market to cooperate with and to export your goods to. Medicine. Okay, I think there's time.
Thank you.
Now the Grand Cross.
My time starts now. How many specific number? Give me a number about why rejoining is uniquely gonna boost everything. For example, like the food shortage is back.
Well, giving you a number on why it will boost. Well, if you want numbers, our 5% evidence indicates how. Our 2,000 pounds indicates how. 3 million
5% evidence of Brexit instead
That's
of
Brexit. That's Brexit.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not
But then if
rejoining.
you're gonna ask about solvency, we think rejoining simply is the way to solve it, right? Look, the reason why there are so much negative impact after Brexit is the fact that we have declining trade and the fact that we have worsened labor markets and etc. Right? We had lack of free movement and all these issues. But when you choose to rejoin and when you opt into the single market, which is something that every single member state can do, you one, take down these regulatory differences. Two, take down customs checks.
Yeah,
Third,
I understand what you mean.
pardon?
Regulatory differences no longer exist or mostly harmonized. Two, custom checks no longer exist and mostly harmonized.
That's not true.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take a
I got
question.
a question.
I'm just gonna take a question on that then. Give me the specific regulations that have been harmonized. Give me the legislations that have harmonized these regulations and prove to me how much have these regulatory takedowns, like how have these regulatory harmonization actually benefited trade?
If you listen to either my summary or Jason's rebuttal, I think we stated like the EU and UK has already negotiated takedown that eliminates the vast majority of the checks and paperwork. There are
Yeah,
too
but
many
we're not talking
regulations
about
in
checks
EU.
and paperwork.
I don't think that is possible to get like how many exact amount checks and paperwork include these
Yeah,
regulations.
and our evidence under the status quo indicates to you exactly how much trade is still declining, even with your reset deals.
Is it after May 2025?
Pardon?
Is it after May 19th?
We'll look at that later, but right now, as what we can understand, with both the TCA but other various reset deals that you're talking about, they have not recovered
The
significantly.
thing is, like,
we
you cannot
tell
just say this by saying it drastically declined when we give you a 9 billion net benefit because of the taking down of the regulations, right? I think
And plus it's May. Plus the deal was signed in May. It's now been 3 months. It's signed in May 19th. It's August 16th. Right? Need time to let the benefits materialize. We don't think
it's a deadlock at the end of the day because, like, realistically speaking, you're not going to be able to observe any
the
tangible
thing is,
benefit.
like,
we
most
resolve
of
it.
your no, Jason, let me do it. Most of your trade benefit come from the hypothesis of Brexit. You take Brexit cards, hypothesizing, by rejoin, you take everything back.
Look,
I know
just
the carding
answer this very
constructed.
one-
Most of
just
your
answer
cards
this
are
one
about
simple
Brexit
question.
instead of rejoining.
Answer this
You
one
can't
simple
hypothesize this based on
Does the
rejoining, right?
reset deal, look, Evelyn, does the reset deal include regulatory harmonization in both sides? And
It
if
talks
so,
about
what are the
regulatory checks and regulatory paperwork. I believe it's
Look, customs checks and paperwork is not regulation. It's
Yeah,
the
but
fact
it's
that
also
work
part of the non-tariff barriers to talk about the
Yeah.
decreased trade in your case, right?
Pardon?
because
There's
of-
also
you
there's
could buy
also
some-
non-tariff barriers to talk about.
Yeah, but the main one is regulations as our case stands.
Yeah,
Alright,
standards.
that's cross.
That's the cross. Now the final focus.
Now, the reason why we outweigh is that their impacts are very likely not sustainable due to domestic backlash and uncertainties. Two reasons. One, political stability comes first in economic prosperity. With social unrest, economic growth only fuels more conflict. They entirely concede our Spring 21 evidence, which talks about how referendum uncertainties caused 25% increase of hate crime in the UK. This is gonna reappear in the UK if they choose to rejoin and reopen the debate. But second, all of the other parties are also pro-Brexit. If the Labour gets moved out of the office due to rejoining, whoever moves in the office would also opt out from the EU. It's not only the Reform Party, but also the Conservative Party. Next, extending the link, 70% of Labour voters oppose to rejoin, meaning referendum breaks a core campaign promise and alienates Labour MPs. Even like 123 says less than 10% of people think rejoin even matters. This is going to cause severe political backlash in the UK. That risk a no confidence vote and snap election, which zeros other impact. But secondly, do not let the rhetoric fool you. Other impacts cards on citizen income, lost trade, GDP are all Brexit instead of rejoining. Why you should vote for us? Because there's no reason to rejoin if post-Brexit world is actually getting better and UK is actually recovering from the heart. We tell you that one, EU-UK summit is already harmonizing the EU-UK regulatory differences and reducing non-tariff barriers, which means at the end of the day, we eliminate most of the link into decreased trade, which means that we're probably going to get near equivalent amount of trade with EU. This impact is not significant. But second, with the unique impact we get is pharma innovation. We tell you that right now, UK is at its high point, ranked 4th globally in terms of pharma innovation. But EU is on its downturn. Its R&D investment is set to drop by a third by 2040. That said, there's no reason for the UK to join a regime with declining innovation, which risks patients, 200,000 patients' lives to in the first place, because they're going to harm the breakthroughs in vaccine, breakthroughs in cancer and respiratory diseases. Lastly, we will tell you that UK has a preferential treatment from the US in terms of steel industry. This preferential treatment is unique to the UK being outside of the EU, as it affects renewable swap and
If everyone is ready, speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Now, there are two reasons why you vote for pro. First on economy and second on lives. On economy, there are two reasons mainly why we win on this clash. First of all, just on non-tariff barriers. Note that Judge, our opponents still haven't necessarily proven to you how, in their role, they can take down these non-tariff barriers, specifically focusing on regulation. Our case, our entire case from the top of it already tells you that the majority of these trade deficits, these trade declines come from regulatory differences and other issues like customs checks. Even by their best case scenario, they can take down customs checks. They don't prove to you how they can actually create or they can actually take down these systematic regulatory differences without creating the exact uncertainty that they claim. This gives us access to our impacts, including the 5% GDP boost, but also our 3 million employment boost, which outweighs any impact that they can give you. But secondly, on lives, Judge, our vaccine argument stands in the end of the day because they still have not engaged you how specifically when they do not take down these non-tariff barriers, good medicine from the UK can actually flow into the EU. Now, moving on to a few pieces of weighing. First of all, we outweigh on solvency because in the end of the day, almost all benefits opponents claim require solvency from the pro side to be actually achieved. For instance, their steel industry impact can only be achieved if there's a large enough market to cooperate with and to export their goods to. For medicine, these well-developed medicine cannot flow out properly unless non-tariff barriers are taken down and proper trade can happen. On our side, the solvency is simple. Accessing the single market would mean taking down regulatory barriers and non-tariff barriers. It would unify regulations and take down the exact reasons why trade declined after Brexit. But second of all, we also outweigh on probability. Their whole response on trade is to say an understudied, underanalyzed reset deal signed in May, which we have no idea what benefits or harm it's going to create, is going to take down the non-tariff barriers and improve trade. However, in our side, it's confirmed that even with the TCA, with various regulatory decisions, they claim trade is still 31% comparatively worse. They cannot prove to you the unique solvency. They cannot prove to you the unique probability. They cannot give you a coherent impact in the end of the day. You vote for pro because we're the only side that brings meaningful reform and meaningful change to the United Kingdom.